small claims docket clerk at the entrance to courtroom 3 of the county civic building that Friday morning. A wiry man named Owen Tomislav, who had run the small claims docket window for 11 years, and who had seen in those 11 years many kinds of small problems that were not, by anyone's honest measure, small to the people standing in front of him, was the first person in the building who heard the senator's chief of staff use the word professional consequences. He heard it at 10:08 in the morning at the docket window, where the chief of staff had presented himself 15 minutes before the docket call. He had not at that point met the judge. He had not at that point met opposing counsel. He had not at that point met the small business owner whose case was at the top of the docket. He had only at that point met Owen Tomislav at the docket window, where he had asked, very pleasantly, whether there was any chance the matter at the top of the morning docket might be quietly moved off list this morning. Owen Tomislav had said also very pleasantly, "Sir, the docket is the docket. It's set the night before. We don't move cases off list at the window. Anything procedural goes through Judge Mallory once court is called. Have a good morning." The chief of staff had nodded once. He had said still pleasantly, "I understand. I'll just need you to keep in mind that there are professional consequences for everyone involved here if this matter doesn't resolve correctly. I'm sure you'll bear that in mind." Owen Tomislav had not, in his 11 years at the docket window, ever been spoken to that way. He had also not, in his 11 years at the window, ever had any difficulty knowing what to do about it. He had said evenly, "Sir, please find a seat. Court will be called at 10:30. Then, when the chief of staff had turned and walked into the courtroom, Owen Tomislav had picked up the small black phone on the corner of his desk, called the chamber's extension, and said, in his careful, even voice, "Your Honor's clerk, please. This is Owen at the small claims window. I have a procedural matter that may benefit from your awareness before docket call." It was, by Owen Tomislav's quiet later count, the first of 3 things he did that Friday morning that ended up mattering. The case at the top of the morning docket was a $1,840 small claims action filed by a small business owner, a man named Felipe Aguilar, who ran a one-truck plumbing and irrigation business on the east side of the county, and who had been, for 19 years, the only Spanish-speaking plumber listed in the county's small business directory, against the 26-year-old adult son of a sitting state senator. The senator's son, whose name was Davis Whitford III, and who had been driving his father's pickup truck home from a college friend's wedding rehearsal, had on a Tuesday afternoon 5 months earlier reversed his father's pickup truck out of a private driveway into the parked side of Felipe Aguilar's 11-year-old service truck in the public lot of the small county grocery store. The collision had left a long crease along the driver's side door of Felipe Aguilar's truck, had cracked the driver's side mirror, and had bent the running board mounting bracket beneath the cab. The cosmetic and mechanical repair, by the only certified body shop within reasonable driving distance of Felipe Aguilar's East Side neighborhood, came to $1,840.73. Felipe Aguilar had, that Tuesday afternoon, taken 3 careful photographs of the damage with his phone, had exchanged information with Davis Whitford III, and had given the young man the chance, which he had himself in 19 years of small business operation, never refused another person, to pay the repair voluntarily and quietly out of pocket. Davis Whitford III had instead called his father. His father had instead called his chief of staff. The chief of staff had, over the following 5 months, declined 3 written settlement offers from Felipe Aguilar's small lawyer, a young attorney from the same East Side neighborhood named Esmeralda Quintana, whose firm took, on average, 4 small claims actions a month at a reduced rate. The chief of staff's written declines had each been polite, and each had suggested that Mr. Aguilar might find it advisable to reconsider the matter at a more reasonable valuation, by which the chief of staff had appeared to mean a payment of nothing. Felipe Aguilar had, on the advice of Esmeralda Quintana, filed the small claims action. It had been calendared on Judge Eliza Mallory's small claims docket. Judge Mallory had been on the small claims bench for 17 years. She was 56. She had been before the bench a county assistant district attorney for 8 years, and had been before that an assistant federal public defender for 4. She had on her 17-year small claims bench a particular reputation that had earned her over the years no nickname louder than the very plain the small claims judge. Her courtroom ran on time, her rulings were brief, her contempt findings were rare. She had not, in 17 years, ever been the subject of a single judicial conduct complaint. She also had in chambers behind her courtroom an old beige-corded telephone with a single direct line to the office of the county chief judge 2 floors up. She had used the line by her own quiet count 11 times in 17 years. She had not used it lightly. She had also in chambers an old beige courtesy intercom panel that connected the chambers to the courtroom and to the hallway outside the chamber's door. The panel had a single brass toggle, marked C for chambers and X for external. The toggle had that Friday morning been left in the C position, the way it almost always was. The chamber's intercom panel was, for once, working precisely as designed. What the panel did not pick up, what no panel in the building could pick up, was the conversation that happened in the hallway outside the chamber's door at 10:22 a.m., 2 minutes before docket call, between the senator's chief of staff and his hired attorney for the proceeding. The hired attorney was a man named Lance Pelham, a mid-size firm partner of 17 years who had, on his way into the building, already begun to wonder whether he had made a mistake by accepting this particular retainer. The hallway between the chamber's door and the courtroom side door was, however, monitored by the building's standard security camera audio system. The system was, by county policy, set to record both video and audio of all public corridor traffic in the civic building during business hours. The system's audio was, in fact, very high quality. The conversation in the hallway, as preserved by the security camera audio system that morning, ran 61 seconds. The first 50 seconds were the chief of staff explaining to Lance Pelham, in the careful, pleasant voice he had used at the docket window, that he was going to have a short private word with the judge in chambers before the matter was called. Lance Pelham objected. The chief of staff overrode him. He said in the 70th second that the senator's office has long memories and short patience, and there are a number of moving pieces in this courthouse's budget on which I happen to sit. He said in the 78th second that if Judge Mallory understands those moving pieces, this matter resolves in 20 seconds and we all have a productive morning. He said in the 83rd second that he was going to walk into chambers in 25 seconds and that Lance Pelham could either join him or wait in the corridor, and that either way the senator's office expected the matter to be off the docket within 6 minutes of court being called. He turned, he walked at a measured, deliberate pace across the corridor to the chamber's door. He did not, however, walk into chambers. He could not because what he had not known, what nobody on the small claims side of the building, including Owen Tomislav at the docket window, had until that morning known, was that Owen Tomislav's 10:08 phone call to chambers had been relayed by Judge Mallory's senior clerk to the senior bailiff on duty, who had quietly closed the chamber's door and locked it from the inside, with Judge Mallory and her senior clerk seated calmly inside it, 15 minutes before docket call. The chief of staff knocked on the chamber's door. He waited. He knocked again. The chamber's door did not open. The chief of staff knocked a third time more loudly. He said, in a voice the corridor security camera picked up cleanly, "Your Honor, this is the office of Senator Whitford. I would like a brief private word before docket call. I am sure we can resolve this matter pleasantly and quickly. I have been advised that this will be a productive conversation for everyone." The chamber's door did not open. The chief of staff by then had begun to lose his composure. He said, in a voice the corridor security camera picked up cleanly, "Your Honor, I am not making this complicated. I am asking in a professional manner for a brief conversation. There are professional consequences for everyone in this building if this matter does not resolve correctly. I would like to be very clear about that. I am asking for a brief conversation." The chamber's door did not open. The chief of staff said, in a voice the corridor security camera picked up cleanly, "Your Honor, we can do this the easy way, or we can find out together what kind of memory the senator's office has." Inside the chambers, Judge Eliza Mallory finished writing the line she had been writing in her bench notebook. She set down her pen, she looked at the senior clerk, she said very evenly, "Please ask Captain Reeves to step into the corridor. Have the corridor audio segment from the last 60 seconds saved and certified to the Deputy Chief Judge's office immediately. Once Captain Reeves is in the corridor, please unlock this door. Then please be at the bench when I come in. We will start at 10:30. The senior clerk picked up the small chamber's desk phone. She made 3 brief calls. At 10:28, the senior bailiff Captain Reeves stepped into the corridor with 2 deputies. He did not raise his voice. He did not hurry. He stood at the precise position the bailiff standing protocol prescribed, 3 feet from the chief of staff, and said, "Sir, I'm going to need you to come with me, please. The chief of staff turned. He looked at the captain. He said, I'm sorry. This is a private conversation with. Captain Reeves said, Sir, come with me, please. The chief of staff said, Look, I don't think you understand who I represent. Captain Reeves said, Sir, last time, come with me, please. We can do this either way. The chief of staff went with Captain Reeves and the two deputies. They walked at a measured, deliberate pace down the corridor and around the corner to the bailiff's office. The corridor security camera caught all of it cleanly. In the corridor behind them, Lance Pelham stood very still. He had not, in 17 years of practice, ever watched a client of his be walked to a bailiff's office before court was called. He turned very slowly and walked into courtroom 3 through the public door. He sat down at the defense table. He waited. At 10:30 precisely, court was called. Judge Eliza Mallory took the bench. She did not look at the empty space at the defense table where the chief of staff had been intended to sit. She did not look at the rear gallery where Davis Whitford III was sitting in a careful navy suit. She did not look at the small business owner Felipe Aguilar, who was sitting at the plaintiff's table next to Esmeralda Quintana with a small stack of repair shop receipts and 3 printed photographs of the damage to his service truck. She did instead what she always did at small claims docket call. She read aloud from the docket the name of the first matter on the calendar. Aguilar versus Whitford, counsel. Esmeralda Quintana stood. Esmeralda Quintana for the plaintiff, Your Honor. Lance Pelham stood. Lance Pelham for the defendant, Your Honor. The defendant is present and ready to proceed. Judge Mallory said, Mr. Pelham, before we proceed. The court has been informed by the senior bailiff that an individual identifying himself as a representative of the senator's office attempted, at 10:22 this morning, to enter chambers without invitation and made a series of statements in the chamber's corridor that have been captured by the building's standard security audio system. The individual is now in the bailiff's office. The corridor audio segment has been certified and forwarded to the Deputy Chief Judge's office. The court is taking the chamber's corridor matter under separate consideration and will rule on it at the conclusion of this docket. The court is going to set that matter aside for the moment. We will proceed with Aguilar versus Whitford on its merits. Lance Pelham said very quietly, Understood, Your Honor. The small claims matter then proceeded the way small claims matters proceeded in Judge Mallory's courtroom. Felipe Aguilar testified to the collision. He laid out on the rail the 3 printed photographs of the damage. He laid out on the rail the certified repair shop estimate and the certified final repair invoice. He laid out on the rail the registration on his service truck and the proof of insurance and the insurance company's letter declining coverage because the at-fault driver had not been the policyholder. Esmeralda Quintana asked 4 short, clean questions. The whole presentation, from the moment Felipe Aguilar sat down at the witness chair to the moment he stood up, took 11 minutes. Lance Pelham then cross-examined Felipe Aguilar for 2 minutes. He did not by that point have many useful questions to ask. He asked Felipe Aguilar to confirm that the figures on the repair invoice matched the estimate. They did. He asked Felipe Aguilar to confirm that the damage to the service truck had occurred on the date and at the location stated in the small claims petition. It had. He sat down. Judge Mallory said, Mr. Pelham, does the defense wish to call the defendant? Lance Pelham said, We do, Your Honor. Davis Whitford III took the witness chair. He was 26. He had been, by his own quiet later admission, expecting this morning to be a 15-minute formality. Instead, his father's chief of staff had been walked to a bailiff's office. His attorney had not spoken to him in 20 minutes, and the judge in front of him had a face, the careful, even shape of a face that has, in 17 years on the bench, never once raised its voice and was not going to raise its voice today either. Lance Pelham asked Davis Whitford III whether he had, on the afternoon in question, reversed his father's pickup truck out of a private driveway into the parked side of Felipe Aguilar's service truck. He said he had. Lance Pelham asked him whether he disputed the photographs of the damage. He said he did not. Lance Pelham asked him whether he disputed the certified repair invoice of $1,840.73. He said, after the smallest pause, that he did not. Lance Pelham sat down. Esmeralda Quintana did not cross-examine. Judge Mallory said, on the record before the court, the defendant has by his own testimony admitted to the collision, to the photographs of the damage, and to the certified repair invoice. The court enters judgment for the plaintiff in the amount of $1,840.73, plus court costs of $75, plus statutory post-judgment interest. The court further orders the defendant to pay the judgment within 30 days. Mr. Whitford, please rise. Davis Whitford III rose. Mr. Whitford, Judge Mallory said, your obligation to Mr. Aguilar is now $1,915.73. The court will not detain you further on the merits of the matter you brought before it. The court does wish to say on the record two things. The first, the 5-month delay between the collision and this hearing represents, by any honest measure, a significant inconvenience to Mr. Aguilar, who has had to operate his one-truck plumbing and irrigation business with damaged equipment during that interval. The second, the settlement offers Mr. Aguilar made through Ms. Quintana over the last 5 months were, by the standard this court applies to small claims pre-suit conduct, eminently reasonable. The court will not, in this proceeding, sanction the conduct of the defense at this proceeding's pre-suit phase. The court does encourage the defendant, in his future dealings with Mr. Aguilar and with anyone else, to consider whether settling small problems pleasantly and quickly is, on balance, a better use of everyone's time than not. You may sit, Mr. Whitford. You may also leave the courtroom now. Davis Whitford III sat. He stood up. He walked at the careful pace of a young man whose afternoon plans had now changed, to the rear of the courtroom and out the public door. He did not at any point look at his attorney. His attorney, Lance Pelham, gathered his files quietly into his briefcase and followed at the kind of professional distance Lance Pelham had become very good at over 17 years. Felipe Aguilar did not move from the plaintiff's table. He folded his 3 printed photographs back into the small manila folder he had brought to court. He folded the repair shop estimate and the certified final repair invoice into the same folder. He folded his hands on top of the folder. Judge Mallory said, Mr. Aguilar. Felipe Aguilar said, yes, Your Honor. Mr. Aguilar, the court owes you, on the record, an apology for the 5 months it took for this matter to reach this courtroom. The court extends that apology now. You may take the judgment when it is entered to the court clerk's office on the 2nd floor. The court clerk's office will assist you with the collection process, which the court will, by separate order, expedite. Thank you for your patience. You may go. Felipe Aguilar nodded once. Thank you, Your Honor. He stood. Esmeralda Quintana shook his hand. They walked together past the rail, past the docket clerk window where Owen Tomislav nodded gently at them, and out the public door. They turned left in the corridor and walked the careful, steady walk of a man who had, in 19 years of running a one-truck plumbing and irrigation business on the east side of the county, finally been told by a courtroom that the small problem he had brought to it was not, in fact, small. It was by then 11:04 a.m. Judge Mallory then turned to the second matter on the morning docket. The morning docket had 11 matters. She called each of them. She heard each of them. She ruled on each of them with the same quiet, careful steadiness with which she had heard the first. The 11th matter concluded at 12:06 p.m. Court recessed at 12:06 p.m. At 12:08 p.m., the Deputy Chief Judge of the County Civic Building called Judge Mallory's chambers and confirmed that the corridor security camera audio segment from 10:22 that morning had been authenticated, and that the Deputy Chief Judge's office had, on the strength of the audio segment alone, accepted Captain Reeves's report and Judge Mallory's preliminary findings. The Deputy Chief Judge had then, at 12:11 p.m., signed a summary contempt finding in the matter of the unnamed individual currently in the bailiff's office. The individual would be remanded for processing at the county detention facility. The court would, by separate written order, refer the conduct of the Chief of Staff to the State Attorney General's office for review under the relevant state bribery, judicial tampering, and obstruction statutes. The court would further, by separate written order, refer the conduct of the Chief of Staff to the Senator's office for the Senator's office's own review of its staff personnel matters. The court would further notify the State Ethics Commission. The court would further provide a copy of the corridor audio segment to the press pool that monitored the building's public information desk. At 12:17 p.m., the Chief of Staff was walked from the bailiff's office to a county sheriff transport vehicle in handcuffs. The corridor security camera caught the walk cleanly. He did not speak. He looked at the floor. He was, by any honest measure, in cuffs by the lunch recess. By 2 p.m. that afternoon, the press pool had picked up the audio segment and the contempt finding. By 3 p.m., the senator's office had issued a written statement disavowing the chief of staff, accepting the resignation he had not yet submitted, and announcing that the senator had personally instructed the senator's son Davis Whitford III to pay Felipe Aguilar's judgment in full by wire transfer that afternoon. The wire transfer cleared at 3:38 p.m. At 3:45 p.m., Esmeralda Quintana's small East Side firm received from the small business owner Felipe Aguilar an emailed receipt of the wire transfer and a small attached note that read, in Felipe Aguilar's careful Spanish, only recibido, gracias por todo. Esmeralda Quintana forwarded the receipt to her own senior partner with a one-line note that read, closed. By lunch. At 4 p.m., the deputy chief judge of the county civic building called Judge Mallory's chambers a second time. The deputy chief judge said very quietly, Eliza, good work. Judge Mallory said very quietly, thank you, the clerk in front, Owen Tomislav. He picked up the phone at 10:08. None of this happens at 12:17 if he doesn't pick up the phone at 10:08. I would appreciate it if the building knew that. The deputy chief judge said, it will know. Judge Mallory put down the phone. She finished the line she had been writing in her bench notebook. She set down her pen. She drank her cooled coffee. She went home. In the corridor of courtroom 3 that Friday evening, after the building had emptied, Owen Tomislav walked his usual slow route past the empty courtroom and the empty docket window on his way to the staff lot. He paused for one short second at the docket window where he had stood at 10:08 that morning. He thought about the small black phone on the corner of his desk. He thought about how a building, when the building was running the way it was supposed to run, was made of small phone calls picked up at the right time. He thought about the clerks and the bailiffs and the senior bailiff Captain Reeves, and the deputy chief judge and the corridor security camera audio system, and Judge Mallory in chambers behind a locked door, and the way the building had, in the careful steady 3 hours and 43 minutes between 10:08 and 12:17, done what the building had been built to do. He turned off the corridor light. He went home. He slept well. In the morning he came back. The small black phone on the corner of his desk was where he had left it. The docket window was where it had always been. The building, in its quiet and lawful way, was waiting. Felipe Aguilar took his service truck to the only certified body shop in his East Side neighborhood the following Monday morning. The repair the body shop confirmed would take 3 working days. Felipe Aguilar paid in cash with the senator's son's wire transfer having cleared his account on Friday afternoon. He drove home in a rental at the end of the day on Thursday. On Friday morning, his service truck, with the long crease along the driver's side door repaired, the driver's side mirror replaced, and the running board mounting bracket beneath the cab straightened, was returned to him. He drove it that Friday morning, on the same careful East Side route he had driven for 19 years, to the first small irrigation job on his Friday calendar. The job was at a small family home where the elderly woman who lived there had, for 14 years, been Felipe Aguilar's only Saturday morning regular customer. She came out onto the porch when she saw the freshly repaired service truck. She did not at first say anything. Then she said in careful Spanish, Felipe, la camioneta está bien, bueno. Felipe said, sí, señora, está bien. He went with his careful patient walk to the small backyard and began the small careful irrigation job that the elderly woman had called him about the previous week. By the close of business the following month, the State Attorney General's office's preliminary review of the Senator's Chief of Staff's conduct in the Chamber's corridor had concluded. The review had referred the matter for formal prosecution under the state's judicial tampering statute. The Senator's Chief of Staff had retained counsel, a new attorney, not Lance Pelham, and had been arraigned. He had pled not guilty. The matter was the following spring set for trial. The Senator himself had by then completed his term in office. The Senator had not at any point in the intervening months publicly defended the conduct of his former Chief of Staff. The Senator had the spring before taken an early retirement position at a regional nonprofit. He had not in his post-public service life taken any further policy positions. The judicial conduct community across the state had, in the months after the Chamber's corridor matter, quietly updated the standing protocol for all Chamber's corridor access in every courthouse in the state. The new protocol, posted on a small printed notice on every Chamber's door in every county building in the state, read, in simple plain language, only this: all Chamber's corridor access by request only. All Chamber's corridor audio is recorded under standing policy of the state judiciary. Thank you for your understanding. In Judge Mallory's chambers, the old beige courtesy intercom panel still sat where it had sat for 17 years. The brass toggle was still marked C for chambers and X for external. Judge Mallory still kept it, almost always in the C position. The chamber's door was almost always unlocked. The building, in the quiet and lawful and patient way the building had been built for, kept doing what the building had been built to do. The record when it was needed was the record. The record that Friday morning had been complete. It always, in the end, would be.